Please, just let me stay until morning. No, you need to leave.
Mother, what are you doing out here?
Is that you, my son?
Rain hammered the streets of Harare as blind 68-year-old Farai Moyo stood barefoot outside the locked gates of her son's mansion. Her clothes were soaked, her hands trembled around a walking cane, and beside her lay the small cloth bag Ruvimbo had packed before ordering her out. "Please, just let me stay until morning," Tariro whispered. The gate remained closed. Then headlights cut through the rain. A luxury car suddenly stopped. Farai Moyo stepped out and froze when he recognized the shivering woman outside his own home. What Farai discovered that night would change his marriage forever. Before we continue, tell us what country you're watching from and your local time. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, subscribe and stay with us. Long before the night when rain would fall against the iron gates of his mansion, Farai Moyo believed he had finally built a life strong enough to protect the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. At 42, Farai was one of Zimbabwe's most respected businessmen. His logistics company, Moyo Continental Freight, had grown from 2 second-hand delivery trucks into a regional network moving agricultural goods, medical supplies, and industrial equipment across southern Africa. His name appeared in business magazines. His company occupied several floors of a glass office building in Harare. He owned properties, vehicles, and investments that his younger self could never have imagined. Yet whenever people praised his success, Farai remembered a different picture. His mother, Tariro Moyo, standing behind a wooden market stall before sunrise. That was where his real story had begun. Tariro was 68 now. Her hair had turned almost completely gray, and blindness had taken away the sight she once depended on to survive. But Farai still remembered her as the tireless woman who woke before dawn, carried baskets to the market, returned home exhausted, and somehow found enough strength to ask whether he had finished his schoolwork. Farai's father had died when Farai was still young. After that, Tariro raised him alone. There had been days when she claimed she was not hungry, so her son could finish the food. Farai understood the truth only years later. He never forgot it. That was why, after becoming wealthy, he repeatedly asked Tariro to leave her modest rural home and live with him in Harare. She always refused. "I know where everything is, here," she would tell him, "and people know me." Her blindness made familiarity precious. Inside her old house, Tariro could count the steps from her bed to the kitchen. She knew where the doorway ended and the veranda began. She recognized neighbors by their footsteps and voices. Even the sounds of chickens passing bicycles and children returning from school helped her understand the world around her. Farai respected her independence, until the house became dangerous. One afternoon, a neighbor called him after discovering Tariro sitting outside with a bruised knee. Part of the old veranda had weakened, and she had stumbled over a broken board. The injury was minor. The warning was not. Farai drove to see her that weekend. "Come to Harare with me," he pleaded. Tariro smiled gently. "You have your own family now. You are my family. I mean your marriage." Farai understood what she feared. He had been married to Ruvimbo for 6 years. Ruvimbo was 36, educated, polished, and socially confident. She attended charity dinners, business functions, and corporate events beside Farai with effortless elegance. When they had first married, Farai believed her confidence balanced his quieter personality. Their mansion stood in one of Harare's affluent neighborhoods behind high walls and black iron gates. It contained more rooms than Tariro's entire childhood neighborhood seemed to need. "There's plenty of space," Farai said. "You won't disturb anyone." Tariro turned her face toward his voice. "It isn't space I'm worried about." Farai became quiet. "Has Ruvimbo ever made you uncomfortable?" No. Tariro answered too quickly. The truth was more complicated. Ruvimbo had never openly mistreated her, but Tariro had noticed something whenever she visited. Ruvimbo was courteous rather than affectionate. She would offer tea, ask about Tariro's health, and then disappear into another room. Nothing she did could reasonably be called cruel. Still, Tariro sensed that her presence changed the atmosphere. She did not want to become a permanent guest in a house where she might not truly be wanted. Farai took his mother's hands. "Mama, when I had nothing, you never asked whether there was enough room for me in your life." Tariro lowered her head. That was different. No, it wasn't. His voice softened. "Let me take care of you." Several days later, Tariro finally agreed. She packed surprisingly little. Some clothes, a small radio, a worn Bible, a wooden box filled with family photographs she could no longer see, and an old cloth bag Farai remembered from childhood. When Farai brought her to Harare, he personally guided her through the mansion. "This is the sitting room." Tariro tapped her cane gently against the floor. "And how many steps to my room?" Farai smiled. "You've been here 5 minutes. I need to learn." So they counted together. Farai showed her the furniture doors, bathrooms, and staircase. He had rails installed in several places and instructed the household staff never to move objects Tariro depended upon without telling her. Her bedroom was spacious and comfortable, overlooking a garden she could smell even though she could not see it. Tariro touched the bed carefully. "This room is too much for one old woman." Farai laughed. "You complained your village house was enough. Now this is too much. Is there any house that will satisfy you?" "One with my son visiting more often." The joke struck deeper than she intended. Farai's smile faded slightly. His business was expanding, and expansion required travel. In less than 2 weeks, he was scheduled to leave Zimbabwe for important negotiations with international partners. If successful, the agreement could transform his company. That evening, Ruvimbo joined them for dinner. She was warm and attentive. "Mama Tariro, would you like more vegetables?" "No, thank you. You hardly ate." "I ate enough." Ruvimbo reached toward her plate. "You must eat properly while you're here." Farai watched with visible relief. Perhaps he had worried unnecessarily. After dinner, Tariro quietly approached Ruvimbo while Farai answered a business call. "My daughter Tariro said, 'I know this is your home.'" Ruvimbo smiled. "It's Farai's home too." "I know. I only wanted you to understand that I did not come here to interfere with your marriage." For a brief moment, Ruvimbo said nothing. Then she touched Tariro's shoulder. "You don't need to explain yourself." Tariro nodded. She wanted to believe those words, but somewhere inside her, an uneasiness remained. The morning of Farai's departure arrived quickly. His luggage waited near the front entrance while his driver loaded the car. Tariro stood beside him, holding her cane. "You work too," she said, "and you worry too much. That is a mother's work." Farai hugged her. "I'll call every day. You don't have to. I know." He kissed her forehead. Then, before walking outside, Farai asked Ruvimbo to speak with him privately. They stepped into their hallway. His expression became serious. "My mother won't always ask when she needs something." Ruvimbo folded her arms lightly. "I understand. She spent her whole life pretending she was stronger than she felt, even now." Ruvimbo glanced toward the room where Tariro waited. Farai continued, "She gave up everything for me. I can travel because I believe she's safe here. She is safe." Farai took his wife's hand. "Please, Ruvimbo, while I'm gone, take care of her exactly the way you would want someone to take care of your own mother." Ruvimbo looked directly into his eyes. "You have my word." Relief crossed Farai's face. He kissed her cheek and walked toward the waiting car. Tariro listened as the front door closed. A few moments later, she heard the vehicle start. She stood silently with both hands resting on her cane as the sound of her son's car grew weaker beyond the gates. Beside her stood Ruvimbo. Neither woman spoke, and Tariro could not see the expression slowly disappearing from her daughter-in-law's face. For the first few days after Farai left Zimbabwe, nothing changed dramatically. That was what made Tariro question her own uneasiness. Each morning, Ruvimbo greeted her politely. Breakfast arrived on time. Nyasha helped her dress when necessary, and the household remained calm. Farai called from abroad every evening. "How is Mama?" was usually one of his first questions. Ruvimbo always answered warmly, "She's fine. Stop worrying." Sometimes she even handed the phone directly to Tariro. Farai would laugh. "Are they treating you well?" "Too well," Tariro replied. "Your wife thinks I need feeding every hour." Ruvimbo smiled whenever Farai could hear her. Someone has to keep her healthy. Those conversations reassured him. They also reassured Tariro. Perhaps she had misjudged Ruvimbo. Perhaps the younger woman simply needed time to adjust to sharing her home with an elderly mother-in-law. But small things began changing. The first happened at breakfast. Tariro entered the dining room, slowly tapping her cane ahead of her. She stopped beside the chair she had learned to recognize by its position near the window. Her hand reached forward. The chair was not there. She nearly lost her balance. Nyasha hurried toward her. "Mama, careful." Before Nyasha could help, Ruvimbo spoke from across the room. "The chair was moved yesterday." Tariro steadied herself. "I didn't know. You cannot expect everyone to keep every piece of furniture in exactly the same place forever." Tariro was surprised by the sharpness in her voice. "I only need to know when something changes." Ruvimbo sighed. "Yes, of course." That evening, Farai called. Ruvimbo's voice immediately softened. "Your mother had a wonderful day." Tariro said nothing. The next incident seemed equally small. One afternoon, Tariro asked where her radio had been placed. "It was beside my bed this morning." Ruvimbo barely looked up from her phone. "Maybe you moved it." Tariro smiled awkwardly. "I cannot remember moving it." "Well, nobody here has any reason to take an old radio." Tariro heard the contempt beneath the sentence. Nyasha eventually found it on a shelf across the room. "Perhaps I forgot," Tariro murmured. But she knew she had not. A week passed. Ruvimbo's patience became thinner whenever Farai was not listening. If Tariro asked for help finding something, Ruvimbo sighed. If Tariro walked too slowly through a hallway, Ruvimbo told her to move aside. If she asked twice whether a door was open, Ruvimbo answered, as though the question were an accusation. Yet whenever Farai called, another Ruvimbo appeared. One evening, Farai requested a video call. Ruvimbo sat beside Tariro on the sofa. "Mama," Farai said brightly. Tariro smiled towards his voice. "My traveler, how are you?" "I am well." Ruvimbo gently adjusted Tariro's shawl. "Tell him what we had for dinner." Tariro hesitated. "Chicken." "And vegetables," Ruvimbo added cheerfully. She ate everything. Farai laughed. "That sounds better than what I'm eating here." Ruvimbo placed an affectionate hand on Tariro's shoulder. To Farai, it looked like tenderness. To Tariro, the hand felt strangely deliberate. When the call ended, Ruvimbo removed it immediately. The room became silent. "You don't need to sit with me during every call," Tariro said carefully. Ruvimbo stood. "I was helping. I can speak to my son without help." Ruvimbo turned toward her. "Then perhaps you should stop behaving as though you need help with everything else." The words landed heavily. Tariro lowered her face. "I'm sorry if I have inconvenienced you." Ruvimbo gave a short laugh. That is exactly the problem. What problem? You apologize, but nothing changes. Tariro tightened her fingers around her cane. I cannot change being blind. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Ruvimbo walked away. Tariro remained on the sofa. She did not cry. She had survived too many difficult years to cry easily over cruel words. But that night, she lay awake, listening to unfamiliar sounds in the mansion. A refrigerator humming somewhere beyond her room. A distant door closing. Footsteps in the corridor. In her village home, darkness had never frightened her because she knew every corner. Here, darkness was everything. And suddenly, the enormous house felt much larger. The following morning, Nyasha found Tariro trying to locate the kitchen. You should have called me. I can manage. Nyasha gently took her arm. You don't have to prove that. Tariro smiled. You are young. You don't understand. When people must help you too often, eventually they begin counting how much trouble you cause. Nyasha understood more than Tariro realized. She had already noticed Ruvimbo's changing behavior. But she was an employee, and employees in wealthy homes learned quickly which truths were dangerous to speak. 3 days later, Farai called during the lunch. Ruvimbo answered. He sounded tired but excited. The negotiations are going well. That's wonderful. I might need another week. Ruvimbo looked across the room toward Tariro. Take whatever time you need. How is Mama? She's enjoying herself. Farai asked to speak with her. Ruvimbo handed Tariro the phone. I may be away longer than expected, Farai explained. Tariro's smile disappeared briefly, but she recovered. Finish your work. You're sure? Of course. Farai paused. Mama, something sounds different. Tariro felt Ruvimbo standing nearby. I am only tired. You would tell me if anything was wrong. Tariro swallowed. Yes. After the call ended, Ruvimbo took the phone from her hand. For several seconds, she remained silent. Then she walked toward the window. Outside, the gardens stretched beneath the afternoon sun. Farai's absence had changed something inside the mansion, or perhaps it had simply revealed what had always been hidden. Ruvimbo turned. Her voice was no longer warm. Let us understand something, Mama Tariro. Tariro slowly lifted her head. You are living here because Farai insisted. Tariro said nothing. When he is home, I tolerate the way he rearranges everything around you. But he isn't here now. Tariro's fingers tightened around her cane. Ruvimbo stepped closer. So, while my husband is away, things will be different. The words were quiet, almost calm. But Tariro understood them perfectly. For the first time since arriving in Harare, she realized that the discomfort she had sensed was not imagination, and Farai was thousands of kilometers away. The change did not come all at once. Ruvimbo was too careful for that. Instead, Tariro's life inside the mansion became smaller, one quiet decision at a time. The first change came at breakfast. For weeks, Tariro had eaten at the dining table. The arrangement helped her maintain a sense of normal life. She knew the position of her chair, the distance to the kitchen, and the number of steps from her bedroom. One morning, Nyasha found her standing beside the table. Ruvimbo entered moments later. Mama Tariro, from today, you can eat in your room. Tariro turned toward her voice. Why, it will be easier. For whom? The question escaped before Tariro could soften it. Ruvimbo paused. For everyone. Tariro understood. She returned to her room without arguing. At lunchtime, a tray arrived with a small bowl of sadza and vegetables. There was no meat. Tariro ate quietly. At dinner, the portion was smaller. The following day was the same. By the end of the week, Tariro had learned not to ask what everyone else was eating. Then came the second change. Ruvimbo entered Tariro's bedroom one afternoon. "We need this room." Tariro was sitting near the window, listening to her radio. "For what guests may be coming next month." Tariro frowned. "Farai chose this room because the bathroom is close. There is another room near the back corridor." Tariro knew little about that section of the house. "I have already learned my way around here. You can learn again." Tariro touched the handle of her cane. "Could we wait until Farai returns?" Ruvimbo's voice hardened. "Do I need my husband's permission to decide how rooms are used in my own home? Number good." Nyasha was ordered to move Tariro's belongings that afternoon. The new room was smaller and located near the servants' quarters. For a sighted person, the difference might have seemed insignificant. For Tariro, it meant losing the map she had constructed inside her mind. She had to begin again. 7 steps from the bed to the door. Turn right. Follow the wall. 12 steps. A corner. Another corridor. The bathroom was farther away. The dining room seemed impossibly distant. The first night, Tariro woke needing water. She reached for her cane and stepped into the corridor. Her left hand followed the wall. 1 step. 2. 3. She counted carefully. At what she believed was the corner she turned. Her cane struck a decorative table. Something fell and shattered. Lights came on. Ruvimbo appeared. "What happened? I'm sorry." Tariro froze. "I was looking for the kitchen." Ruvimbo stared at the broken vase. "That was expensive. I didn't know it was there." "Of course you didn't." Tariro heard the irritation. "I will pay for it." With what silence followed. Ruvimbo seemed to realize what she had said, but she did not apologize. Nyasha arrived and began gathering the pieces. "Leave it," Ruvimbo ordered. Nyasha stopped. Then Ruvimbo looked toward Tariro. "If you need something at night, wait until morning." Tariro returned to her room thirsty. The next morning, Ruvimbo gathered the household employees. From now on, nobody is to abandon their duties every time Mama Tariro calls. Nyasha looked uncomfortable. She sometimes needs guidance. She has a cane, but the house is unfamiliar. She has lived here long enough. Tariro heard part of the conversation from the corridor. She quietly returned to her room before anyone noticed. That afternoon, she tried to reach the garden alone. Farai had once described the flowers planted there. Tariro could not see them, but she loved their scent. She counted the steps. At one point, she became confused and stopped. Her cane touched empty space. "Nyasha." No answer. She tried again. "Is anyone there?" A worker passed nearby, but remembered Ruvimbo's instruction. He continued walking. Tariro eventually found a wall and followed it back. By the time she reached her room, her hands were trembling. She sat on the bed. For years after losing her sight, Tariro had fought to remain independent. Blindness had taken her vision. She refused to let it take her dignity. Yet, inside her son's enormous mansion, she had begun to feel less capable than she had in her modest rural home. That evening, Nyasha quietly entered. She carried a plate. "I brought you dinner." Tariro touched the edge. There was chicken, vegetables, and sadza. "This is too much. It is a normal meal." Tariro became still. What was sent earlier, Nyasha hesitated. Tariro understood from the silence. "My child, you should not do this. You need to eat, and you need your job." Nyasha sat beside her. "My grandmother was almost blind before she died." Tariro smiled faintly. "Then she would tell you not to risk your future for a stubborn old woman." Nyasha laughed softly. She was stubborn too. For the first time that day, Tariro smiled genuinely. They ate together quietly. Neither heard Ruvimbo approaching. The door suddenly opened. Nyasha stood. Ruvimbo looked at the plate. "Where did that come from?" Nyasha swallowed. The kitchen. I know where food comes from. Her voice became colder. Why did you bring it here? Mama Tariro hadn't eaten enough. That is not your decision. She was hungry. Tariro immediately intervened. Ruvimbo, please. Nyasha was only being kind. Ruvimbo ignored her. She stepped toward the young housekeeper. You work for me. Nyasha lowered her eyes. Yes, madam. When I give instructions, you follow them. Yes. If I tell you not to spend your working hours attending to someone, you do not decide that your feelings matter more than my instructions. Nyasha remained silent. Ruvimbo pointed toward the doorway. Go. Nyasha turned to leave. Then Ruvimbo stopped her. One more thing. Nyasha looked back. If I catch you secretly bringing food here again, or helping Mama Tariro without my permission, you will pack your belongings and leave this house the same day. Tariro's face tightened. Do not punish her because of me. Ruvimbo turned toward her. Then stop encouraging her. Nyasha walked away. The door closed. Tariro sat alone beside the untouched plate. For the first time, the truth frightened her more than Ruvimbo's cruelty itself. The young woman who had become her only quiet source of kindness could lose everything simply for helping her. Tariro slowly pushed the plate away. That night, she made a painful decision. Whatever happened next, she would ask Nyasha for nothing. After Ruvimbo threatened Nyasha, Tariro became even quieter. She stopped asking for help unless absolutely necessary. When she was hungry, she waited. When she became confused in the corridors, she searched for a wall and guided herself back. When she needed something from another part of the mansion, she sometimes postponed it for hours, rather than risk getting Nyasha into trouble. But there was one thing Tariro still waited for every day. Farai's call. His voice had become her only connection to the life she had known before the mansion turned cold. Farai called most evenings, usually after his meetings ended. At first, Tariro had been allowed to answer freely. That changed, too. Ruvimbo began keeping Farai's calls on her own phone. One evening, Tariro sat in her room listening to her radio when she heard Ruvimbo laughing somewhere down the corridor. She recognized her son's voice faintly through the phone. Tariro stood immediately. Using her cane, she moved toward the doorway. By the time she reached the sitting room, the conversation was ending. Tell Mama I love her, Farai said. I will, Ruvimbo replied. The call ended. Tariro stopped. Was that Farai? Ruvimbo looked up. Yes. He didn't ask to speak with me. He did. Tariro waited. Ruvimbo returned her attention to her phone. I told him you were sleeping. Tariro's fingers tightened around her cane. But I was not sleeping. You usually rest at this time. I wait for his calls. Ruvimbo sighed. Farai is working. He doesn't need every conversation to become 20 minutes of worrying about whether you ate lunch. Tariro swallowed her disappointment. Next time, please tell me when he calls. Ruvimbo gave no answer. The next evening, Farai called again. This time Tariro never knew. Ruvimbo told him his mother had gone to bed early. The following day she said Tariro was taking a nap. Another time she claimed Tariro was outside enjoying the garden. Farai accepted the explanations at first. He trusted his wife. But after several days, something began bothering him. Is Mama avoiding me? He asked one evening. Ruvimbo laughed. Why would she avoid you? I've barely spoken to her this week. She's fine, Farai. Let me speak to her now. Ruvimbo hesitated. She's resting. Wake her, Farai. Please. There was something in his voice that made refusal dangerous. Ruvimbo walked toward Tariro's room. Before opening the door, she lowered the phone. Farai wants to speak with you. Tariro immediately smiled. My son Ruvimbo leaned closer. He is already under enough pressure with his business. Do not make him worry unnecessarily. Tariro's smile faded. I would never want to worry him. Good. Ruvimbo handed her the phone. Hello, Mama. Farai sounded relieved. Tariro closed her eyes instinctively. My child, where have you been hiding? I have been here. Farai laughed. Ruvimbo keeps telling me you're sleeping. Tariro felt Ruvimbo standing beside the door. I suppose old women sleep more than young businessmen. Farai became quiet. How are you? I am well. Are you eating properly? Tariro remembered the small bowl she had received that afternoon. Yes. Are you comfortable? She thought about the unfamiliar room. Yes. Is everyone helping you? Tariro paused. Ruvimbo shifted near the doorway. Yes. Farai. His voice softened. You sound tired. I am only getting old. Don't say that. Tariro smiled sadly. You cannot negotiate with time. I negotiate for a living. That made her laugh. For several precious minutes, Tariro almost forgot everything. Then Farai told her the negotiations were becoming more complicated. I may need to stay longer. Her heart sank. How much longer I don't know yet. Tariro wanted to say, come home. Instead, she said, finish what you went there to do. You're sure? Yes. Farai hesitated. Mama. Yes. If anything is wrong, you will tell me. The question pierced through her defenses. Tariro opened her mouth. For one moment she considered telling him everything. Then Ruvimbo stepped farther into the room. Tariro heard her shoes against the floor. I will tell you, she whispered. The conversation ended soon afterward. Ruvimbo took the phone. You see? That was easy. Tariro turned her face toward the window. She said nothing. Days passed. Farai became increasingly uneasy. During meetings, he found himself checking his phone. He told himself he was being foolish. His mother was safe. She had food, shelter, household staff, and his wife. What could possibly be wrong? Then one night he called later than usual. Ruvimbo was upstairs. Nyasha answered the house phone. Mr. Moyo. Nyasha, where is my mother? In her room, sir. Please take the phone to her. Nyasha hesitated. She knew Ruvimbo's instructions. But this was Farai. Yes, sir. She hurried down the corridor. Tariro was sitting on her bed. Your son. Tariro's entire face changed. Farai Nyasha placed the phone in her hands and quietly left. For the first time in weeks, Tariro was speaking to him without Ruvimbo beside her. Mama Farai said, tell me the truth. Tariro became still. About what something is wrong. She felt her throat tighten. Why do you say that? Because I know your voice. Silence. Farai continued. You raised me. You knew when I was lying before I even learned how to lie. Do you think I cannot hear when you are hiding something? Something. Tariro's eyes filled with tears that could no longer see. Farai! What happened? Her hand trembled around the phone. She thought of the smaller meals, the relocated bedroom, the broken vase, Nyasha being threatened, the endless hours alone. Footsteps sounded outside. Tariro froze. Ruvimbo. The door opened. Tariro immediately changed her words. I miss you, Farai. That is all. On the other side of the world, Farai sat silently. He did not believe her. Neither did Ruvimbo, but for very different reasons. Ruvimbo remained in the doorway, watching. And Tariro understood that from that moment onward, even speaking privately with her own son had become dangerous. That night, long after Ruvimbo had left her room, Tariro remained awake. Rain had not yet come to Harare, but a dry wind brushed against the windows, carrying distant sounds from the city. Tariro sat upright in bed with her hands folded over her blanket. Farai's question would not leave her mind. What happened? She had almost told him. For one brief moment, she had wanted to forget her pride and say everything. Come home, Farai. Your wife does not want me here. I am hungry sometimes. I am afraid to walk through your house. But then she had heard Ruvimbo approaching, and fear had closed her mouth. Not fear for herself, fear for Farai. Tariro had spent most of her life protecting her son from burdens he was too young to carry. Even now, though he was a powerful businessman with thousands of employees, some part of her still saw the skinny schoolboy who came home carrying books beneath his arm. She remembered a very different home. Farai had been 11 when his father died. There had been no company then, no mansion, no driver, no employees waiting for instructions, only a small house, unpaid bills, and a widow who suddenly had to decide how to feed her child. Tariro began waking before sunrise. She bought vegetables from farmers and carried them to a roadside market. On better days, she sold tomatoes, onions, and leafy greens. On difficult days, she cooked food and sold small portions to workers. Later, she added second-hand clothes. Farai sometimes helped after school. Mama, I can stop studying and work, he told her once. Tariro had stared at him. You will do no such thing. But you are tired. My tiredness is not your future. She insisted that he remain in school. When fees were due, money somehow appeared. Farai did not know Tariro had sold her late husband's radio. Another year, she sold 2 pieces of jewelry. When Farai needed money for examinations, Tariro went several weeks wearing sandals held together by string. She never told him. Sacrifice in Tariro's mind was not something a mother announced. It was simply what love required. Years later, when Farai entered university, Tariro cried after the bus carried him away. Not because she was sad, because she knew poverty had failed to keep her son trapped. Her eyesight began deteriorating around that time. At first, letters became difficult to read. Then faces became blurred. Neighbors urged her to seek treatment, but appointments cost money. Farai was still studying. Tariro postponed the problem. After graduation, she always said. After graduation became after Farai's first job. Then after he started his small business. By the time Farai discovered how serious her condition had become, much of the damage could not be reversed. He carried guilt over it for years. Tariro never allowed him to. You did not take my sight, she told him. You gave my sacrifices somewhere to go. Remembering those words. Now Tariro lowered her head. How could she call Farai and become another problem? His company was negotiating the largest expansion in its history. Thousands of livelihoods depended on decisions being made overseas. She could survive discomfort. She had survived worse. At least, that was what she told herself. The next morning, Ruvimbo entered without knocking. You spoke to Farai for quite a while last night. Tariro recognized the warning. He called me. What did you tell him, that I missed him? Nothing else? No. Ruvimbo studied her face. Tariro could not see the suspicion in Ruvimbo's eyes, but she could feel the silence. Finally, Ruvimbo said, Good. She walked away. Later that afternoon, Tariro heard voices from the veranda. Ruvimbo had invited a friend, Chietza, for coffee. Tariro had no intention of listening. She was trying to reach the garden when she heard her own name. She stopped. I don't understand why Farai brought her here permanently, Ruvimbo complained. Chietza lowered her voice. She is his mother. That doesn't mean she belongs in our marriage. Tariro remained behind the partially open door. She's blind, Ruvimbo. Where would she go? She has a village. Can she live there alone? She managed before. Ruvimbo sounded irritated. You don't understand. Everything changes when she is here. Farai asks about her constantly. The staff treat her as though she owns the place. Every decision somehow has to consider Mama Tariro. Chietza was quiet. Then she said, "Maybe Farai feels guilty." "Exactly." Ruvimbo laughed bitterly. "And I am expected to live with the consequences." Tariro's hand tightened around her cane. She should have walked away, but then Ruvimbo said the words that stopped her. "Sometimes I think this mansion will never truly feel like mine until that old woman is gone." Silence followed. Even Chietza seemed uncomfortable. "Ruvimbo, what?" "That sounds harsh. I am tired of pretending." Tariro slowly backed away. She returned to her room without entering the garden. She closed the door and sat on the edge of her bed. For weeks she had tried to excuse Ruvimbo's behavior. Perhaps the younger woman was stressed. Perhaps Tariro required more assistance than she realized. Perhaps living with a blind elderly woman was difficult. But now there was nothing left to misunderstand. Ruvimbo did not merely resent the inconvenience. She resented Tariro herself. A soft knock came later. Nyasha entered carrying clean clothes. "You didn't go outside today." "I changed my mind." Nyasha heard something unusual in her voice. "Mama, are you all right?" Tariro smiled. "Yes." Nyasha remained standing. "You don't have to protect everyone all the time." The words startled Tariro. For a moment she almost laughed. Then her expression softened. "My child, sometimes keeping quiet is how we protect the people we love." Nyasha looked at her sadly. "And who protects you?" Tariro had no answer. That evening she opened the old wooden box containing Farai's childhood photographs. Her fingers moved across pictures she could no longer see. She found one she recognized by its torn corner. Farai, at 12 years old, smiling in a school uniform Tariro had worked for months to afford. She held the photograph against her chest. For the first time since coming to Harare, Tariro wondered whether her silence was truly protecting her son, or whether it was simply allowing someone else to hurt his mother without consequences. Nyasha Dube had learned early that working inside a wealthy home required more than knowing how to clean rooms or prepare a dining table. It required knowing when not to speak. At 26, she had already worked for several families in Harare. She understood that household employees often saw things outsiders never did. Arguments hidden behind closed doors, loneliness behind expensive furniture, and cruelty disguised as discipline. Most workers survived by pretending not to notice, but ignoring Tariro was becoming impossible. One morning, Nyasha found her sitting beside an untouched breakfast tray. "Mama, why haven't you eaten?" "I am not hungry." Nyasha touched the bowl. The porridge was cold. "You said that yesterday. Old people eat less." Nyasha sat beside her. "And stubborn people lie badly." Tariro smiled despite herself. "You have become disrespectful. I learned from you." Nyasha placed the spoon in Tariro's hand. "Please." Tariro ate a few mouthfuls. Nyasha watched silently. She had noticed how loose Tariro's clothes were becoming. She had also noticed that Ruvimbo rarely entered the older woman's room unless she wanted something. Whenever Farai called, however, the story was different. Ruvimbo spoke about Tariro as though she spent every day surrounded by comfort. Nyasha began to understand that this was not ordinary tension between a woman and her mother-in-law. It was deliberate concealment. That afternoon, Tariro tried washing some clothes in the bathroom. Nyasha discovered her kneeling beside a basin. Mama Tariro turned. "I can wash my own clothes. We have a laundry room. And if you help me, you may lose your job." Nyasha became quiet. Tariro continued scrubbing. Nyasha knelt beside her. "Give them to me." "No." "Mama Tariro." "No, Nyasha." The young woman gently took the wet garment from her hands. If Madame Ruvimbo asks, I will say I found them with the other laundry. I will not allow you to lie because of me. Then don't ask me what I tell her." Tariro shook her head, but a small smile appeared. Nyasha gathered the clothes. Before leaving, she placed a banana and 2 pieces of bread on the bedside table. Tariro heard the movement. "What did you put there?" "Nothing. You are terrible at lying, too." Nyasha laughed softly and left. Those small acts became their quiet routine. Nyasha never openly disobeyed Ruvimbo. Instead, she found moments when kindness could hide inside ordinary work. A little extra food, fresh water, clean clothing, a few minutes of conversation. Sometimes she guided Tariro to the garden before sunrise when Ruvimbo was still asleep. Tariro loved those mornings. She would sit beneath a tree and listen to birds moving through the branches. "This reminds me of home," she once whispered. Nyasha looked at her. "Do you want to go back?" Tariro considered the question. "I want to go somewhere where I am not a burden." "You are not a burden." Tariro smiled sadly. "That depends on who is carrying you." Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, Farai faced problems of his own. The international expansion negotiations had stalled. A major partner wanted new financial guarantees. Lawyers were revising contracts. Meetings that were supposed to last hours stretched across days. Farai called Ruvimbo. "I may need another 10 days. Ruvimbo stood beside the bedroom window. "That's fine. I hate being away this long. You're building something important." Farai hesitated. "How is Mama?" "She's fine. Put her on." Ruvimbo glanced down the corridor. "She's outside with Nyasha." Farai frowned. "With Nyasha?" "Yes. I thought you were spending time with her." Ruvimbo's expression changed. "Farai, I have responsibilities too. I wasn't criticizing you." It sounded like it. Farai rubbed his forehead. "I'm tired. Forget it." After the call, Ruvimbo went looking for Nyasha. She found her guiding Tariro back from the garden. Ruvimbo stopped in the corridor. "What did I tell you?" Nyasha immediately released Tariro's arm. She wanted some fresh air. "She has a cane." Tariro stepped forward. "I asked her." Ruvimbo turned toward her. "And every time you ask, she abandons her work. She was helping me for 5 minutes. 5 minutes becomes 10. 10 becomes an hour." Nyasha lowered her eyes. Ruvimbo moved closer. "You seem determined to test my patience. I am doing my job. Your job is what I say it is." Tariro's voice remained calm. "Please leave her alone." Ruvimbo laughed. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Make everyone feel sorry for you." Tariro stiffened. "I have never asked anyone to pity me." "You don't need to ask. You sit there with that cane speaking softly, and suddenly everyone thinks you are some helpless saint." Nyasha stared at Ruvimbo in disbelief. Tariro's face tightened with humiliation. "I only wanted to sit outside. And I only want one day when this entire house does not revolve around you." The words echoed through the corridor. Ruvimbo turned and walked away. Nyasha immediately reached for Tariro. The older woman pulled back gently. "Do not." "Mama, she is watching us." Nyasha looked down the corridor. Ruvimbo had disappeared. But Tariro was right. From that day, Nyasha became more careful. She also became frightened. Not because she feared losing her job, because Ruvimbo's anger was growing. A few evenings later, Nyasha heard raised voices while cleaning near Tariro's room. Ruvimbo was inside. "You need to understand your position," she was saying. "I understand it very well," Tariro replied. "Do you? I am your husband's mother. Nothing more. Nothing less. And this is my house. I have never claimed otherwise." Nyasha stopped outside. Something told her this conversation mattered. Her phone was in her apron pocket. After hesitating, she quietly activated the audio recorder. Inside, Ruvimbo continued. If Farai were not blinded by guilt, you would not be here. Tariro answered softly. My son loves me. That is not guilt. Call it whatever makes you feel important. Nyasha's stomach tightened. She hated what she was doing. Recording private conversations felt wrong, but something about Ruvimbo's voice frightened her. She saved the file. Not to embarrass anyone, not to threaten Ruvimbo. Only because she understood something Tariro still refused to accept. If the situation became worse, Farai might someday ask what had happened inside his home. And when that day came, the word of a frightened housekeeper and a blind elderly woman might not be enough. For the first time, someone inside the mansion now possessed proof. The wooden box had survived almost everything Tariro had survived. Poverty, widowhood, moving from one rented room to another, Farai's childhood, her failing eyesight, and finally, blindness. It was not valuable in the way Ruvimbo understood value. The wood was scratched, one corner had been repaired, and the small metal latch no longer closed properly. But inside, it was a life. One afternoon, Ruvimbo entered Tariro's room, looking for a set of spare keys that she believed Nyasha had left there. She did not find the keys. Instead, she noticed the box beneath the bed. She pulled it out. Inside were old photographs, school certificates, letters, receipts, and several objects from Farai's childhood. Ruvimbo picked up a faded photograph. A young Farai stood beside Tariro in front of their old home. His school uniform was slightly too large. Tariro was younger, smiling proudly, with one hand resting on her son's shoulder. Ruvimbo looked at another photograph. Farai graduating. Another showed him beside his first delivery truck. There were dozens of memories from a life that existed long before Ruvimbo entered it. What are you doing? Tariro's voice came from the doorway. Ruvimbo turned. I was looking for something. That box was under my bed. I noticed. Tariro moved slowly toward her. Please put it back. Ruvimbo examined an old letter. What is all this? My family. Farai is my family too. I never said he wasn't. Ruvimbo dropped the letter into the box. You keep everything. Some things deserve keeping. The simple answer irritated Ruvimbo more than an argument would have. Everywhere she looked, there seemed to be evidence that Tariro possessed something she could never purchase, a history with Farai that began before wealth status or marriage. Ruvimbo closed the box. You should take these things back to your village. Tariro became still. My village. Yes. You know I cannot live there alone. You lived there before the veranda became unsafe. It can be repaired. Tariro shook her head. That is not the only problem. Ruvimbo folded her arms. Then what is? I cannot see, Ruvimbo. I am aware. The neighbors who helped me are getting older. Some have moved away. The nearest clinic is difficult for me to reach. Farai brought me here because he was worried. Farai worries about everything involving you. Tariro heard the bitterness. This is not about my safety, is it? Ruvimbo did not answer. Tariro slowly sat down. If you want to say something, say it. Ruvimbo looked at her. I want my home back. The words hung between them. Tariro's expression changed. I did not take your home. You changed it. I barely leave this room. That is not the point. Then explain the point. Ruvimbo's restraint finally began to break. The point is that even when Farai is thousands of kilometers away, everything is still about you. That is not true. He calls and asks about you. I am his mother. He asks whether you ate, whether you slept, whether someone walked with you, whether your room is comfortable. Tariro listened quietly. Ruvimbo continued. Do you know what he asks about me? That is between you and your husband. Exactly. My husband. Tariro finally understood. This was not really about bedrooms, or food, or household routines. It was jealousy, not romantic jealousy, something deeper and more destructive. Ruvimbo saw love as something limited. Every piece Farai gave his mother felt like something being taken from his wife. Tariro spoke gently. Farai loving me does not reduce what he can feel for you. Easy for you to say. I raised him to love his family, and now I am expected to be grateful for whatever part of him is left. Tariro shook her head. No one is competing with you. You are. I am 68 years old, and somehow you still control him. Tariro's face hardened. I have never controlled my son. You don't have to. He feels guilty every time you struggle. That is his heart speaking. No, it is what you taught him. For the first time, Tariro felt anger rising above her fear. She stood. You may dislike me, Ruvimbo. You may resent helping me. But do not turn the love between a mother and her child into something shameful. Ruvimbo stared at her. Then leave. Silence. Tariro's anger disappeared. What? Go back to your village. I already told you why I cannot. Then find somewhere else. Tariro tightened both hands around her cane. You are asking a blind woman to leave her son's home while he is overseas. I am asking you to stop making this house miserable. Tariro felt something inside her finally break. Not her courage, her patience. For weeks she had accepted humiliation because she believed silence protected Farai. But silence had changed nothing. It had only taught Ruvimbo that there would be no consequences. No, Tariro said. Ruvimbo blinked. What did you say? I said no. You don't decide. I will not leave secretly while my son is away. Ruvimbo stepped closer. I can make that decision for you. Tariro lifted her chin toward the sound of her voice. Then when Farai comes home, I will tell him everything. The room became completely still. It was the first time Tariro had openly threatened the secret Ruvimbo had worked so carefully to protect. You wouldn't. I should have told him weeks ago. Ruvimbo's breathing changed. Tariro continued. I kept quiet because I did not want to damage your marriage. I thought patience might bring peace. And now I understand my silence has only encouraged you. Ruvimbo looked toward the wooden box. For the first time, anger was mixed with fear. If Tariro spoke, Farai would ask questions. He would examine the changed bedroom. He might question the staff. Nyasha might talk. Everything Ruvimbo had hidden behind affectionate phone calls could collapse. She slowly stepped backward. Be careful, Mama Tariro. Tariro did not move. Is that a warning? Ruvimbo opened the door. Call it whatever you want. Then she left. Tariro remained standing beside the bed, trembling despite the courage in her words. Outside, Ruvimbo walked down the corridor with one thought consuming her. Tariro could no longer be allowed to remain in the mansion until Farai returned, and from that moment removing her stopped being an angry wish. It became a plan. Farai had expected the final negotiations to last at least another week. Instead, everything changed on a gray Tuesday morning. He was sitting in a conference room thousands of kilometers from Zimbabwe when one of the lawyers placed a revised agreement in front of him. The guarantees have been accepted. Farai looked up. All of them. All of them. For nearly 3 weeks, the expansion had consumed every hour of his life. Meetings had collapsed. New conditions had appeared without warning. Investors had threatened to withdraw. Now, suddenly, the obstacle was gone. By late afternoon, the final documents were signed. His senior executive, Tendai Nkuba, smiled as they left the building. You should stay 2 more days. Celebrate. Farai shook his head. I'm going home. Tendai laughed. Ruvimbo knows. No. You're surprising her. Farai looked out through the car window. That's the idea. But the answer was only partly true. He wanted to surprise Ruvimbo. More than that, he wanted to see his mother. Tariro's voice during their last private conversation had remained in his mind. Something is wrong. Farai could not explain why he was so certain. His mother had denied it. Yet he had known Tariro his entire life. When he was a boy, she could tell he had fought at school simply from the way he opened the front door. Now he was supposed to believe he could not recognize fear in her voice. Farai booked the earliest available flight. He decided not to tell anyone at home. Not Ruvimbo, not Tariro. He wanted to walk through his own front door and see things exactly as they were when nobody expected him. Back in Harare, Ruvimbo had no idea that her husband was already preparing to return. She spent that Tuesday in a state of growing irritation. Tariro had changed. The elderly woman remained polite, but something important had disappeared from her voice. Fear. For weeks, Tariro had apologized for everything. Now she no longer apologized for existing. When lunch arrived with barely enough food, Tariro asked Nyasha to take the tray back. Nyasha hesitated. What should I say? Say I would like a proper meal. Ruvimbo appeared 20 minutes later. What is wrong with your lunch? It is not enough. You have suddenly become demanding. No, I have stopped pretending. Ruvimbo stared at her. You really intend to tell Farai stories when he comes home? I intend to tell him the truth. He will believe his wife. Then you have nothing to fear. Ruvimbo's jaw tightened. Tariro heard her walk away. Later that afternoon, clouds began gathering over Harare. The air became heavy. Nyasha stood near the kitchen window. It looks like rain. Another worker nodded. A bad storm. Tariro heard thunder in the distance. She had always loved rain. As a child, she had listened to it strike the metal roof of her family home. After Farai was born, rainy evenings often meant sitting beside him while he studied under a small lamp. Rain had once sounded like shelter. That evening, it sounded different. Ruvimbo entered Tariro's room shortly before 6. Pack your belongings. Tariro turned toward her. What? You heard me. Where am I going? That is your decision. Tariro slowly stood. Farai has not returned, and I am not waiting for him. You cannot send me away at night. I told you days ago to leave, and I told you I would speak to my son. Ruvimbo stepped into the room. That is exactly why you are leaving now. Tariro understood. You are afraid. Ruvimbo gave a bitter laugh. Of you, of Farai, hearing the truth. The first drops of rain struck the window. Ruvimbo's voice hardened. Pack. No, I will have someone do it for you. This is my son's home. It is my home, too. And would Farai want his blind mother thrown out of it? Ruvimbo said nothing. Thunder rolled across the city. Nyasha appeared near the doorway. Madame Ruvimbo turned sharply. What dinner is ready? Leave us. Nyasha looked at Tariro. She immediately sensed something was wrong. Mama Tariro, are you all right? She is fine. Tariro spoke before Ruvimbo could stop her. She wants me to leave tonight. Nyasha froze. Tonight, Ruvimbo stepped toward her. Go back to the kitchen. But it's going to storm. I said go. Nyasha hesitated, then slowly withdrew. Ruvimbo opened Tariro's wardrobe. She pulled out several dresses and placed them on the bed. Tariro listened helplessly. You do not have the right to touch my things. I am helping you pack. Stop. Ruvimbo continued. Across the city, traffic moved beneath darkening skies. At Harare's airport, Farai's return journey was already underway. He sat near the departure gate checking messages. One was from Ruvimbo. Hope your meetings are going well. Everything is fine here. Farai stared at the words. He almost replied that he was coming home. Then something stopped him. Instead, he put the phone away. Back at the mansion, rain began falling harder. Nyasha stood in the kitchen, unable to concentrate. She could hear drawers opening down the corridor. Finally, she walked toward Tariro's room. Ruvimbo was placing clothing into Tariro's old cloth bag. "Madame, please." Ruvimbo spun around. "I warned you. She cannot go out in this weather. She will find somewhere. She cannot see." Tariro stood beside the bed holding her cane. Her face remained composed, but Nyasha could see her hands trembling. Ruvimbo zipped the bag. "This ends tonight." Lightning flashed beyond the windows. At almost the same moment, Farai's plane began its journey toward Zimbabwe. He leaned back in his seat, imagining his mother's surprise when she heard his voice at the door. He did not know that while he was traveling home to protect the woman who had once protected him, Ruvimbo was preparing to send that same woman into the storm, and Tariro had no idea her son was already on his way. By 8 that evening, the rain had swallowed Harare. Water rushed along the edges of the streets. Wind pushed against trees and sent leaves scattering across driveways. Thunder rolled above the city, sometimes so close that the windows of Farai's mansion seemed to tremble. Inside Tariro's room, Ruvimbo placed the last of her belongings into the old cloth bag. Tariro stood beside the bed, both hands wrapped around her walking cane. "Please, Ruvimbo." It was the first time that evening she had begged. Ruvimbo stopped. "Let me stay until morning." Her voice was quiet. "I will leave if that is what you insist upon. I will call someone tomorrow. Perhaps a neighbor from my village can help me." Ruvimbo said nothing. But not tonight. Another crash of thunder shook the windows. "I cannot see the road," Tariro continued. "I do not know this neighborhood well enough to walk alone. You will find somewhere. How? That is no longer my responsibility." Tariro lowered her head. For several seconds only the rain spoke. Then she asked, "If your own mother were standing here, would you do this to her?" Ruvimbo's face hardened. "Do not talk about my mother. Then remember that I am someone's mother too." That sentence struck something inside Ruvimbo, but pride quickly buried it. She lifted the cloth bag. "We are finished talking." When they entered the corridor, Nyasha was waiting. Her eyes immediately fell on the bag. "Madame, please reconsider." Ruvimbo kept walking. "I told you to stay out of this." Nyasha followed. "Mama, Tariro can sleep in my room tonight." Tariro turned toward her voice. "No, Nyasha." "Yes, Mama." Ruvimbo stopped. "She is not sleeping anywhere in this house." Nyasha stared at her employer. "Where is she supposed to go? I don't care." Nyasha looked genuinely shocked. "She's blind." "I know she is blind," Ruvimbo's voice echoed through the corridor. Other employees became silent. Some watched from doorways. None moved. They had families to support, jobs to protect, rent to pay. And Ruvimbo understood their fear. "Everyone back to work," she ordered. The doorways emptied. Tariro heard them retreat. She did not blame them. Poverty had taught her how expensive courage could be. At the entrance hall, the storm sounded even louder. Ruvimbo opened the front door. Cold air rushed inside. Tariro instinctively stepped backward. "Ruvimbo, walk." Nyasha moved forward. "I'll go with her." "No, I'm off duty soon." "You are not leaving this property with her." "Then I'll call a taxi." Ruvimbo turned sharply. "If you interfere again, you will not have a job tomorrow." Nyasha's mouth closed. Tariro reached toward the sound of her breathing. "My child." Nyasha took her hand. "Do not lose your livelihood because of me." Tears filled Nyasha's eyes. "But where will you go?" Tariro forced a faint smile. "God has brought me through worse nights." Ruvimbo placed the bag near her feet. "Enough." Tariro stepped outside. Rain immediately struck her face. Nyasha covered her mouth. The elderly woman moved slowly across the driveway, tapping the ground with her cane before every step. Tap, step, tap, step. The rain grew heavier. Halfway to the gate, Tariro stopped. She could no longer distinguish the driveway from the sound of water rushing beside it. Nyasha rushed forward. Ruvimbo grabbed her arm. "Let me help her to the gate," Nyasha cried. "No, she could fall." Ruvimbo hesitated. Then she called one of the security workers. "Open the gate." The man looked uncomfortable. "Madam, open it." He obeyed. The large iron gate slid aside. Tariro heard the mechanical sound. It was the sound of rejection. She continued walking. When she finally reached the entrance, Nyasha called from behind her. Mama Tariro turned. Nyasha wanted to run to her, but Ruvimbo stood between them. Tariro lifted one hand. "Go inside, my child." Then she crossed beyond the gate. Her bag was placed beside her. The gate began closing. Ruvimbo Nyasha shouted. The metal barrier shut. Tariro stood outside, alone. For several seconds, she'd simply listened. Rain, thunder, water beneath her bare feet, a passing vehicle somewhere in the distance. She reached backward. Her fingers touched cold metal. The gate was locked. Ruvimbo. No answer. Tariro knocked. "Please." Inside, Ruvimbo stood in the entrance hall. Nyasha stared at her. "You cannot leave her there." She wanted to challenge me. She wanted to speak to her son. Ruvimbo turned away. Nyasha's voice shook. "What will you tell Mr. Moyo?" Ruvimbo stopped. That his mother chose to leave. Nyasha could barely believe what she was hearing. And you think he will believe that Ruvimbo looked back. He will believe his wife. Outside, Tariro stopped knocking. Her shoulders shook from the cold. She pulled the thin shawl around herself, but it was already soaked. For the first time in years, she felt completely lost. Not because she was blind, because the home her son had promised would protect her had just closed its gates against her. She lowered herself carefully beside the wall. Her hand found the cloth bag. She held it against her chest. Memories came unexpectedly. Farai as a child sleeping beside her during thunderstorms. Farai running home from school. Farai promising that one day she would never struggle again. Tariro smiled through tears. "My son," she whispered, "you tried." She did not know where he was. She imagined him in a comfortable hotel room somewhere far away. She prayed he would finish his work safely. She prayed he would forgive her for leaving without saying goodbye. Then, beneath the storm, another sound appeared. An engine. Tariro raised her head. At first she assumed it was a passing vehicle. But it slowed. The sound became louder. Closer. Two bright headlights cut through the rain and turned onto the road leading toward the mansion. Inside the approaching luxury car, Farai looked through the rain-covered window. He had expected to see his gates. Instead, he noticed a solitary figure beside them, an elderly woman, a walking cane, and a familiar old cloth bag resting against her feet. Farai suddenly leaned forward. "Stop the car." The driver pressed the brake. Farai's car stopped several meters from the gate. For one suspended moment, nobody moved. Rain struck the windshield so violently that the figure outside appeared blurred, almost unreal. Farai leaned forward. Turn the lights toward her. The driver adjusted the vehicle slightly. The headlights swept across the gate. Farai saw the walking cane first, then the cloth bag, old brown fabric, a repaired handle, one faded corner. His chest tightened. He knew that bag. As a child, he had watched Tariro carry vegetables to the market in it. Years later, she had used it to carry food whenever she visited him at university. Farai opened the door. "Sir, wait," the driver said. The rain. Farai was already outside. Within seconds, his expensive jacket was soaked. He barely noticed. He walked quickly toward the figure. Then he stopped. Mama Tariro lifted her head. The storm disappeared from her awareness. That voice, she knew it before her mind could understand why it was there. Farai. Her son froze. Tariro reached forward with one trembling hand. "Farai, is that you?" He ran. Farai dropped to his knees in the water beside her and took both her hands. They were freezing. "Mama." Tariro touched his face. Her fingertips moved over his cheeks, forehead, and hair as though she needed to confirm he was real. "You came home." Farai could barely speak. "What are you doing out here?" Tariro's lips trembled. He looked down. She was barefoot. Her clothes clung to her body. Water ran from her gray hair. The cloth bag beside her was packed. Farai removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Mama, who did this?" Tariro said nothing. "Mama, I am all right." Farai stared at her. "No." His voice broke. "You are not all right." The driver rushed over carrying an umbrella. Farai ignored it. He helped Tariro stand. She struggled, and his expression changed when he felt how light she seemed. "Have you lost weight? I am just tired." Farai looked toward the mansion. The gate remained closed. His confusion was becoming anger. "Why are you outside?" Tariro tightened her grip on his arm. "Please, let us go somewhere warm first." Farai picked up her bag. It was heavier than he expected. He immediately understood. This was not a woman who had stepped outside accidentally. Someone had packed their belongings. He pressed the gate intercom. Inside the mansion, Nyasha heard it. So did Ruvimbo. Ruvimbo frowned. "Who is arriving this late?" The security worker checked the monitor. His face changed. "Madam." "What it is, Mr. Moyo." Ruvimbo went pale. "What did you say Mr. Moyo is outside?" Nyasha's hand flew to her mouth. Ruvimbo rushed toward the monitor. Farai stood outside with Tariro beside him. For several seconds, Ruvimbo could not move. He was not supposed to be home. Not tonight. Not now. "Open the gate." Farai's voice came through the intercom. The security worker obeyed immediately. As the gate opened, Nyasha felt tears of relief fill her eyes. Ruvimbo recovered just enough to hurry toward the entrance. Farai walked into the compound supporting his mother. He did not look like the man who had left weeks earlier. There was no relaxed smile, no affectionate greeting, only disbelief. Ruvimbo stepped outside. "Farai!" She forced shock into her voice. "You're home." Farai stared at her. Ruvimbo looked toward Tariro. "Oh my goodness, Mama Tariro." She hurried forward. "What happened?" Farai stepped between them. "You tell me." Ruvimbo stopped. "I don't understand. I found my mother outside our locked gate." Ruvimbo looked at Tariro. "Mama, why did you go outside?" Nyasha, standing near the doorway, stared at her in disbelief. Tariro remained silent. Farai's expression hardened. "Ruvimbo." "Yes." "Why was my blind mother sitting outside in a storm?" Ruvimbo shook her head. "I've been worried sick. She became upset earlier." Tariro slowly lifted her face. Ruvimbo continued quickly. "She said she wanted to leave. I tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't listen." Farai looked at his mother. "Mama." Before Tariro could answer, Ruvimbo stepped closer. "You know how independent she is. She gets frustrated when people help too much." Tonight she became confused. "Confused?" "Yes." Ruvimbo nodded eagerly. She insisted she could manage alone. We tried to stop her. Nyasha lowered her eyes. Farai noticed. He also noticed the security worker refusing to meet his gaze. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Farai looked back at Ruvimbo. You tried to stop her, of course. And then she went outside. In this weather, it happened so quickly. Farai's voice became quieter. Why was the gate locked? Ruvimbo hesitated. Security procedure. And why was nobody outside helping her? I was about to send someone. Nyasha closed her eyes. Lie after lie. Farai said nothing for several seconds. Then he lifted Tariro's cloth bag. What is this? Ruvimbo's face changed. Tariro tightened her hand around her cane. Farai opened the bag. Inside were dresses, medication, personal belongings, her radio, family photographs, the wooden memory box, everything Tariro would need if she were leaving permanently. Farai slowly looked at his wife. Ruvimbo swallowed. She packed that herself. Tariro's lips parted. Farai stared at the bag, then at his blind mother, then back at Ruvimbo. His anger suddenly became frighteningly calm. You said Mama became confused. Yes. You said she wandered outside. She did. Farai nodded, went slowly. Rain continued falling behind him. He placed the bag on the floor. If my blind mother became confused and wandered outside by herself. He paused. Everyone in the entrance hall became silent. Farai looked directly into his wife's eyes. Who packed her bag? Ruvimbo had no answer. And in that silence, Farai understood that whatever had happened while he was away was far worse than anything he had imagined. Ruvimbo opened her mouth, but no words came. Farai did not raise his voice. That frightened her more. He simply stood in the entrance hall, rainwater dripping from his clothes, one hand holding Tariro's packed bag. Take Mama to her room, he told Nyasha. Nyasha hesitated. Which room? Sir Farai looked at her. The question seemed ordinary, but something in Nyasha's expression made him pause. What do you mean? Ruvimbo quickly intervened. We moved her temporarily. Farai turned, moved her. The guest room was needed. For whom? Ruvimbo looked away. Farai's jaw tightened. Nyasha, where has my mother been sleeping? Nyasha glanced toward Tariro. Tariro spoke softly. Farai, please, I am cold. His anger immediately gave way to concern. Of course. He took his mother's hand. Show me. They walked through the mansion. Farai noticed how cautiously Tariro moved. She counted steps under her breath. At one corridor, she hesitated. Nyasha gently guided her. Farai watched. His mother had lived here for weeks. Why did she still seem unfamiliar with the house? They reached the small room near the servants' quarters. Farai stopped at the doorway. This is where you sleep. Tariro said nothing. He remembered the room he had prepared for her near the main family quarters. He had personally chosen it because the bathroom was accessible and the path to the sitting room was simple. Why was she moved here? Ruvimbo had followed them. I told you. We needed the other room. Farai turned. You said guests were coming. Yes. Where are they? The plans changed. Farai stared at her. Another inconsistency. He helped Tariro sit. Nyasha, please bring dry clothes towels, something warm to drink, and food. Ruvimbo immediately said she already ate. Farai looked at his mother. Mama Tariro lowered her face. I ate earlier. What a little sadza. When she could not remember exactly. Nyasha answered quietly. Several hours ago. Farai's expression changed. Bring food. Yes, sir. Ruvimbo crossed her arms. Farai, you are making this into something it isn't. He looked at her. I have not decided what this is yet. The calmness of his response silenced her. For the next hour, Farai focused only on Tariro. Nyasha helped her change into dry clothing. Farai sat outside the room until she was ready, then returned with warm tea. He watched his mother eat, slowly, too eagerly. Farai noticed. "When did you become this thin?" Tariro stopped chewing. "I am old. Stop telling me that." His voice softened. "Please." She reached across the table until she found his hand. "Do not become angry before you understand everything." Farai stared at her fingers. "Mama, I found you barefoot outside my gate in a storm." "I know, with your belongings packed." "Yes, my wife says you wandered outside." Tariro said nothing. Farai leaned closer. "Did you?" Her silence answered him. He closed his eyes briefly. Then he stood. "I need to know what happened." Tariro tightened her grip. "Do not destroy your marriage tonight." Farai looked at her. "I will not make decisions tonight." That promise seemed to calm her. "But I will ask questions." He began with the staff. Not together, one at a time. The security worker admitted that Ruvimbo had ordered the gate opened. "And my mother walked out." "Yes, sir." "Did she ask to leave?" The man hesitated. "I did not hear her ask." "Did she appear confused?" "No, sir." "Who closed the gate?" The worker lowered his eyes. "I did." "On whose instruction?" Silence. Farai already knew. "Thank you." Next came the kitchen staff. Farai asked what Tariro had been eating. The answers were vague. "She received meals, sir." What meals nobody wanted to answer. Farai walked into the pantry himself. He checked household purchase records and meal schedules. His mother's name had been removed from several regular meal preparations. He found notes instructing staff to send food separately to the back room. His stomach tightened. Then he examined Tariro's old bedroom. It was empty. No guests had stayed there. Nothing suggested it had ever been needed. Farai stood in the doorway for a long time. Ruvimbo found him there. "You are interrogating everyone as though I committed a crime." Farai turned. "I am trying to understand why everything you tell me is contradicted by something inside this house. That is unfair. Then help me understand." "I already did." "No. You gave me explanations." He stepped closer. "I want the truth." Ruvimbo's eyes filled with defensive anger. "Your mother never wanted me." Farai frowned. "What does that have to do with tonight everything?" "No. It does not explain why she was outside." Ruvimbo looked away. Farai's phone rang. It was Tendai, checking whether he had arrived safely. Farai declined the call. Then he remembered something. "My calls." Ruvimbo looked back. "What? You kept telling me Mama was sleeping." "She often was." "Or outside." "Yes." "Or at appointments." Ruvimbo said nothing. Farai felt cold despite having changed from his wet clothes. He walked toward Nyasha. The young housekeeper immediately became nervous. Nyasha. "Yes, sir." "You were with Mama often sometimes. Did my wife ever prevent her from speaking with me?" Nyasha looked toward Ruvimbo. Ruvimbo's face became hard. Farai noticed. "Look at me, Nyasha." She did. "You will not lose your job for telling the truth." Tears formed in her eyes. "Sir, what?" Nyasha swallowed. "There is something you need to hear." Ruvimbo stepped forward. "Nyasha, be very careful." Farai raised one hand. "No." The room became silent. He turned toward Ruvimbo. "You have spoken enough tonight." Then he looked back at Nyasha. "What do I need to hear?" Nyasha slowly reached into her apron pocket and removed her phone. Her hands trembled. I was afraid no one would believe Mama Tariro. Farai stared at the device. So I kept something. Ruvimbo's face suddenly lost its color. Farai understood immediately. This was no longer simply one person's word against another. Nyasha had evidence, and whatever truth had been hiding inside his mansion was finally about to speak for itself. Nyasha's phone looked impossibly small in Farai's hand, yet everyone in the room understood that whatever it contained could change a family. Farai looked at the young housekeeper. "What is on this?" Nyasha swallowed. "A recording, sir." Ruvimbo immediately stepped forward. "She recorded private conversations in my home." Farai did not look at her. "When a few days ago," Nyasha answered, "I heard Madame Ruvimbo speaking to Mama Tariro. I was frightened because things were getting worse." "You had no right," Ruvimbo snapped. Nyasha flinched. Farai raised his hand. "Enough." The room fell silent. He pressed play. At first there was only faint movement. Then Ruvimbo's recorded voice filled the room. "You need to understand your position," Tariro answered calmly. "I understand it very well." The conversation continued. Farai listened without moving. He heard Ruvimbo accuse his mother of using helplessness to control him. He heard Tariro insist that she had never tried to interfere in their marriage. Then came the sentence that made Farai's face change. "If Farai were not blinded by guilt, you would not be here." Tariro's recorded voice replied, "My loves me. That is not guilt." Farai stopped the recording. For several seconds he stared at the phone. Then he pressed play again. "Call it whatever makes you feel important," Ruvimbo's voice said. When the recording ended, nobody spoke. Farai handed the phone back to Nyasha. "Is there anything else?" Nyasha hesitated. "Yes." Ruvimbo turned sharply. "Nyasha." Farai stepped between them. "Tell me." Nyasha's eyes filled with tears. She was not eating properly. Farai looked toward the hallway where Tariro rested. "What do you mean? Sometimes her portions were very small. Sometimes she waited a long time." "I fed her," Ruvimbo said. Nyasha shook her head. "You told the kitchen to prepare her meals separately. Because she is elderly. You threatened to fire me for bringing her chicken." Farai slowly turned toward his wife. Ruvimbo's expression tightened. "She is an employee. She disobeyed me. Did you threaten her? I was maintaining discipline. That is not what I asked." Silence. Farai looked back at Nyasha. "Continue." Nyasha told him everything she had witnessed. The furniture being moved without warning. Tariro becoming lost in the corridors. The instructions preventing staff from helping her. The relocation to the back room. The reduced meals. The arguments. The threats. Farai listened. Each detail seemed small compared with finding Tariro outside in the storm. Together, they formed something much darker. A pattern. When Nyasha finished, Farai sat down. His hands covered his face. For weeks, he had called home believing money had protected his mother. He had imagined her eating well, resting, walking in the garden, being cared for. Meanwhile, she had been learning how little space she was permitted to occupy. Tariro appeared at the doorway. She had heard enough. "Farai." He immediately stood. "Mama, you should be resting." "No." Nyasha guided her inside. Tariro sat. Farai knelt before her. "Why didn't you tell me?" There was no accusation in his voice, only pain. Tariro touched his face. "Because you were building something important. Nothing is more important than this. I did not want you flying home angry and destroying years of work." Farai shook his head. "You were hungry. I survived hunger before. That does not make it acceptable. You had responsibilities, and you are one of them." Tariro's hand fell gently onto his shoulder. "I am not your responsibility, Farai. I am your mother. His eyes filled with tears. That makes it worse. He stood and walked away. For the first time that night, anger overtook his restraint. Not loud anger, something heavier. He looked at Ruvimbo. Why? She folded her arms. You have already decided I am a monster. I asked, why? You want the truth? Yes, Ruvimbo laughed bitterly. The truth is that from the day she moved here, I stopped feeling like your wife. Farai stared at her. She needed help. She needed you. She is blind. And every time she struggled, you looked at me as though keeping her happy was my duty. I asked you to treat her with kindness. You asked me to treat her like my own mother. Yes, she is not my mother. The words echoed through the room. Tariro lowered her head. Farai's expression hardened. No, she isn't. But she is a human being. Ruvimbo's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand what it feels like to compete with someone who can never be wrong in your eyes. There was no competition. There was always competition. Farai shook his head. You created one. Ruvimbo pointed toward Tariro. She could call you and everything stopped. She could sound tired and you panicked. She could need something, and suddenly everyone had to rearrange their lives. That is what families do when someone is vulnerable. And what about me? What did my mother take from you? Ruvimbo had no answer. Farai stepped closer. Did you send her outside tonight? Ruvimbo looked away. Answer me. She refused to leave. That is not what I asked. Ruvimbo's breathing became uneven. Farai repeated the question. Did you deliberately send my blind mother outside in that storm? A long silence followed. Finally, Ruvimbo whispered, Yes. Tariro closed her eyes. Farai stared at his wife as if seeing a stranger. Why Ruvimbo began crying. Because I knew she would tell you everything when you returned. Farai's face went still. And because she struggled to continue. Because what Ruvimbo looked directly at him. Because no matter what I did, I believed that if you ever had to choose between me and her, you would choose your mother. Farai absorbed the words. Then he answered quietly, I never asked you to make me choose. Ruvimbo cried harder. You made that choice necessary yourself. Nobody spoke. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken. But inside the mansion, the truth had finally arrived in full, and Farai knew that whatever happened next could not be decided by anger alone. It would have to be decided by justice. Morning arrived quietly over Harare. The storm had passed, leaving the wet streets, broken leaves, and small pools of water across the mansion driveway. Farai had not slept. He sat alone in his study as dawn entered through the windows. For hours he had replayed everything. Tariro outside the gate, her freezing hands, the packed cloth bag, Nyasha's recording, Ruvimbo's confession. Anger told him to act immediately. Pain told him to punish. But Tariro had raised him differently. When Farai was young, she had often told him that anger was useful only when it showed you where something was wrong. After that, she used to say you still need wisdom to decide what to do. So Farai waited until morning. At 7, he found Tariro awake. She sat near the window drinking tea. How do you feel, better? He sat beside her. Mama, I need to make decisions today. Tariro nodded. They are yours to make. I want you to know I will not pretend nothing happened. I know. But I also will not humiliate Ruvimbo publicly. Tariro reached for his hand. That is good. Farai looked surprised. After everything she did, justice does not need an audience. Farai lowered his eyes. She could have killed you. I know. His hand tightened around hers. That is the part I cannot forgive. Tariro was silent for a moment. Then do not force yourself to forgive today. Farai looked at her. Healing is not pretending something did not hurt, she continued. Sometimes it begins by refusing to become cruel because someone was cruel to you. Farai kissed her hand. Later that morning, he asked Ruvimbo to meet him in the sitting room. She entered looking exhausted. Are you throwing me out? Farai remained calm. I am asking you to stay elsewhere while we begin a formal separation. Ruvimbo's face tightened. So that is it? No, she looked at him. That is only the first decision. Farai placed several documents on the table. I have contacted my lawyer. Ruvimbo laughed bitterly. Already I need clarity. You mean you want to take everything? No. That answer surprised her. Farai continued. You will receive whatever you are legally entitled to. I will not hide assets, invent accusations, or use money to punish you. Ruvimbo stared at him. After last night, you still care about being fair. I care about who I become after last night. She looked away. But our marriage cannot continue as though this was an argument about household rules. Ruvimbo said nothing. You deliberately isolated a vulnerable person. You interfered with my communication with her. You threatened an employee for helping her. Then you sent a blind 68-year-old woman outside during a storm and lied about it. Each sentence landed heavily. I cannot build trust on top of that. Ruvimbo wiped tears from her face. I was angry. Anger explains a feeling. It does not excuse a pattern. Farai stood. A driver can take you wherever you choose to stay. Ruvimbo looked at him. Will you ever forgive me? Farai paused. I don't know. It was the most truthful answer he could give. But forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. Ruvimbo lowered her head. Hours later, she left the mansion quietly. There were no reporters, no public accusations, no dramatic scene at the gate. Farai watched the car disappear, feeling no victory, only grief. Then he turned his attention to the household. He gathered every employee. Some looked terrified. You are not here to be punished, Farai told them. Several faces lifted. I want to understand how my mother could suffer in this house, while so many people knew something was wrong. Silence followed. Finally, one worker spoke. We were afraid, sir. Farai nodded. Of losing your jobs? Yes, others agreed. Farai looked at Nyasha. She had been afraid too. The difference was that she had acted anyway. He realized the failure was larger than one cruel person. He had created a household where power flowed downward, and nobody knew whether speaking up was safe. That had to change. No employee in this home will ever again be dismissed for reporting mistreatment of a vulnerable person, Farai said. He ordered new safeguards for staff concerns and made it clear that cruelty toward children, elderly people workers, or dependent adults would never be treated as a private household matter. Then he spoke to Nyasha alone. You risked your job for my mother. Nyasha shook her head. I only did what someone should have done. Exactly. Farai assured her that her position was secure. But Nyasha did not smile. I wish I had done more. Farai understood that feeling. So do I. That afternoon, he walked through the mansion alone. The marble floors shone. The furniture was expensive. Security cameras covered the property. There were gates, alarms, employees, and every comfort money could buy. Yet his blind mother had been unsafe here. Farai entered Tariro's original bedroom. Sunlight fell across the empty bed. He remembered choosing the room. He had been proud. He had thought expensive furniture meant comfort. Household staff meant care. High walls meant protection. He finally understood how wrong he had been. He had provided Tariro with everything except the one thing she needed most: his attention. That realization hurt more than Ruvimbo's betrayal. He found Tariro later in the garden with Nyasha. Farai sat beside his mother. "I am sorry." Tariro frowned. "For what? I should have known. How I heard something in your voice. You asked, and I accepted your answer." Tariro reached for him. "You trusted your wife. I also stayed away because business seemed urgent. You were working." Farai shook his head. "I spent years believing that if I became rich enough, you would never suffer again." Tariro squeezed his hand. "My son's suffering does not always enter through an empty pocket." Farai became still. Sometimes it entered through a beautiful front door. Sometimes it lived behind high walls. And sometimes the person everyone believed was protected was the person nobody had truly seen. Farai finally understood that wealth could build a mansion around his mother, but only love, presence, and courage could make that mansion a home. 6 months later, Rain returned to Harare. But this time, Tariro was not standing outside a locked gate. She sat beneath a covered veranda, with a warm shawl around her shoulders, listening as raindrops touched the garden leaves. The house behind her was not a mansion. Tariro had chosen it herself. After everything that happened, Farai had assumed his mother would remain with him permanently. He was wrong. One morning, several weeks after Ruvimbo left, Tariro called him into the sitting room. "My son, I want my own home." Farai thought he had misheard. "You have one." "No, you have one." He smiled. "You know what I mean." "So do you." Tariro explained carefully. She did not want to return to the unsafe village house, but neither did she want fear to make her dependent forever. "I was independent before blindness," she said, "and I learned independence again after blindness. I want to feel capable, Farai." He struggled with the idea. "What if you fall? What if you fall, Mama?" She laughed. "You cannot protect me from being alive." Eventually, Farai understood. Together, they found a modest single-story home in a peaceful Harare neighborhood. Farai wanted to renovate everything. Tariro stopped him. "Only what I need." They installed handrails, non-slip flooring, accessible bathroom fittings, and simple tactile markers that helped Tariro identify rooms and objects. No unnecessary luxury. No endless corridors. No furniture constantly being moved. Tariro learned the house quickly. 11 steps from her bedroom to the sitting room. 8 more to the kitchen. The veranda was directly beyond the main living area. Within weeks, she could move through the home confidently with her cane. For Farai, watching that transformation was humbling. His mother had never needed a palace. She needed dignity. Nyasha visited often. Farai had offered her a senior household position, but during their conversations, he discovered that she dreamed of studying social care. "You should do it," he told her. "I cannot afford the course." "I did not ask whether you could afford it." Nyasha immediately shook her head. "Sir, I don't want charity." Farai smiled. "Then consider it an investment in someone who taught me something important." With financial support from an education program Farai established, Nyasha enrolled in professional training focused on elderly and disability care. She continued visiting Tariro, not as an employee, but as family. Their bond remained simple. Nyasha brought fruit. Tariro complained that she brought too much. Nyasha ignored her. Some things did not change. Ruvimbo's life changed too. The separation proceeded privately. Farai kept his promise. He did not use his wealth to humiliate her or strip her of what she was legally entitled to. He also did not reverse his decision. Ruvimbo sent Tariro a letter several months later. Tariro asked Nyasha to read it aloud. In it, Ruvimbo apologized without excuses. She admitted that jealousy had slowly turned into resentment, and resentment had become cruelty. She did not ask Tariro to defend her. She asked only for forgiveness someday. When Nyasha finished reading, she asked, "Will you forgive?" Tariro remained silent. Finally, she said, I hope one day I can remember her without pain. Is that forgiveness? Perhaps it is the beginning. She folded the letter and placed it inside her wooden box. Not everything needed to be forgotten in order to stop carrying hatred. Farai, meanwhile, had begun looking beyond his own family. He could not stop thinking about one question. If something like this could happen to his mother, inside the home of a billionaire, what happened to vulnerable elderly people who had no money, no staff, and no one asking questions? He began speaking with organizations supporting visually impaired and elderly Zimbabweans. He listened more than he talked. He met people who had lost independence after disability, widows living alone, older parents neglected by relatives, families who loved their elderly members but lacked resources to care for them properly. From those conversations, Farai funded a community initiative offering home safety improvements, mobility assistance, caregiver, training, and support services. He refused to name it after himself. When journalists asked why he had created it, Farai kept his answer simple: because dignity should not depend on wealth. Tariro approved. Months passed. Farai changed in quieter ways too. He still worked hard. His company continued expanding. But he stopped treating presents as something that could always be postponed. Every Sunday afternoon, unless something truly unavoidable happened, he visited Tariro. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they ate. Sometimes Tariro simply listened to the radio, while Farai answered emails beside her. She liked those visits best. Love did not always need conversation. It needed presence. Then came the rainy evening. Farai arrived just before sunset. Nyasha opened the door. She's outside. Farai's body immediately stiffened. Outside, Nyasha smiled. On the veranda. He relaxed. He walked through the house and found Tariro sitting beneath the covered roof. Rain fell beyond her. For a moment, Farai stopped. The sound transported him back 6 months. His mother beside the gate, bare feet in cold water, her trembling hands, that old cloth bag. Mama Tariro smiled. You always say that as though you are surprised I still exist. Farai laughed softly and sat beside her. They listened to the rain. After a while, Tariro reached across and found his hand. You are thinking about that night. Farai looked at her. How do you know I am blind, not foolish? He smiled, but his eyes became wet. I still see you outside that gate. Tariro squeezed his hand. I remember it too. I wish I could erase it. No. Farai turned toward her. Tariro lifted her face toward the rain. If you erase every painful memory, you may erase what it taught you. Thunder sounded far away. Tariro remained peaceful. Then she said quietly, Do you know something? What I am no longer afraid when I hear rain. Farai could not answer. He simply held her hand. The rain continued falling, but now there was a roof above Tariro, a home behind her, and beside her sat the son who finally understood that true wealth was never measured by the size of the house you gave someone. It was measured by whether they felt safe enough to call it home. Some wounds are created not by strangers, but by people who were trusted with our vulnerability. That makes them especially painful. Tariro's story reminds us that cruelty does not become less serious because it happens behind beautiful walls, and neglect does not disappear simply because someone has food money or a comfortable house. There are people around us who may look protected while suffering silently. An elderly parent may refuse to complain because they fear becoming a burden. A worker may witness wrongdoing but remain silent because losing a job could mean losing the ability to feed a family. A person living with disability may tolerate disrespect because dependence has made speaking up feel dangerous. That is why kindness must be more than a feeling. It must become attention. Farai loved his mother deeply, but for a time he believed financial security was enough. His greatest lesson was discovering that love also requires presence, the willingness to notice changes, ask difficult questions, listen carefully, and create a space where someone can tell the truth without fear. Justice also does not always require revenge. Farai held Ruvimbo accountable without becoming cruel himself. Tariro did not pretend the harm never happened, but she refused to let hatred become the final chapter of her life. And perhaps that is where healing truly begins. Not when we erase the storm, but when the storm no longer controls us. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments what moment stayed with you the most. And if you believe more people need stories about compassion, dignity, justice, and second chances, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. May we remember to protect the people who once protected us, and may nobody we love ever have to suffer in silence simply because they are afraid of becoming a burden.